Secretary Lloyd Austin said in a statement that the strikes targeted underground weapons storage facilities.
The United States has entered the Middle East by bombing the country of Yemen. In October 2024, the U.S. Army launched B-2 Spirit bombers to the Middle East to destroy Houthi target sites in Yemen. This attack has caused chaos in the region, as Yemen and its allies aren't happy with this move. What does this mean for the U.S., Yemen, and the Middle East landscape? Let's find out.
Houthis have morphed into a full-blown rebellion, fighting against Yemen's government from their northern strongholds. They know this land well, and they have local support.
Yemen is a key player in the Middle Eastern geopolitical landscape, which is often overlooked. It has a strategic advantage thanks to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is a critical point in global shipping routes. With access to such an important point in the sea, Yemen can shift the maritime trade as per its liking. On a daily basis, 6 million barrels of oil pass through Yemeni waters, and any disruption in their travel could tremble the global market. Yemen is currently under a civil war where Houthi rebels have stood against the Yemeni government. You might think that this is an internal conflict, but the truth is far ahead from this. Yemen has currently become a proxy battleground where Iran and Saudi Arabia are flexing their influence. The Iran-backed Houthi rebels have challenged the Saudi-supported Yemeni government over their economic, political, and religious marginalization. The U.S., which had troubles with Iran for a while, is seeking this as an opportunity to strike at them. Yemen's lawless territories are home to terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP in the Islamic State or ISIS. These groups pose a great threat to the interests and global security of the United States, which is why it would look to take them down. These militant groups take advantage of Yemen's instability and recruit members to spread their motives. The country's flawed governance allows them to stay hidden in local communities without getting much attention. In October 2024, the United States launched precise airstrikes in Yemen targeting areas covered by the AQAP and Houthi military. These drone attacks were carried in response to the Houthi strikes on U.S. naval assets and Saudi oil containers in the Red Sea. Modern drone technology was used to make sure soldiers had minimal operational risk. Enemy infrastructure for their attacks incurred the most damage. The American Army partnered with regional allies like the UAE and Saudi Arabia to clearly locate the target. These strikes were focused on areas like Hodeidah, Sana'a, and other key areas along the Red Sea. Even though these strikes were meticulously planned, they still resulted in several casualties in the area. People all over the world have raised concerns over it. These airstrikes on Yemen, carried out by the U.S., have caused significant property damage, which included hospitals, schools, and water facilities, leading the country into a severe humanitarian crisis. Humanitarian organizations working in these areas have reported that these attacks have worsened an already difficult living condition in Yemen. Over 50,000 Yemeni civilians have lost their homes and their access to basic necessities. The organizations have also raised questions on the American military and their violation of human rights law in Yemen. The United States claimed that these strikes were a response to the Houthi drone attacks on a U.S. military base and Saudi oil refinery. These back-and-forth strikes have transformed into a broader regional conflict, which is being fueled by Iran, which is directly supporting the Houthis by providing them their finest weapon. They also believe that the Houthis need to be stopped. They are abusing human rights and are recruiting underage soldiers.
The U.S. military says it targeted Houthi operations that have been used for attacks on American Navy warships and merchant vessels in the region. Meanwhile, Israel says
the U.S. government believes that they had to step into this conflict to support its allies and to avenge their infrastructure damage from the Houthis. By collaborating with such influential countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, the United States aims to strengthen its position in the Middle East. The United States has claimed that they carefully trace the areas of militant groups and only strike those areas with little to no casualties. However, that wasn't the case. The American drone strikes have reportedly struck several schools, markets, residential areas, and even hospitals, which has caused millions of property and hundreds of innocent deaths and injuries. Those who were fortunately safe from these strikes had to endure severe trauma. Even though these strikes were aimed at damaging enemy bases, They destroyed several happy families, leaving them stranded without food, clothes, house, and even their loved ones. The country's already struggling from one of the worst humanitarian crises in history. If that wasn't enough for the people of Yemen, the U.S. airstrikes have worsened the situation by destroying the available infrastructure and disrupting communities. A large chunk of Yemeni citizens rely on humanitarian aid. The strike-impacted infrastructure has disrupted aid supply chains, worsening the country's situation. The damage incurred by hospitals, power stations, and water treatment plants has deprived them further of their already insufficient necessities.
Israel says it intercepted missiles sent by the Iran-backed militants.
Even though the U.S. didn't mean to kill several civilians and destroy homes, their actions may have fueled anti-American sentiment. Due to these attacks, several Yemenis will be driven to join extremist militant groups like ISIS and AQAP. The civilians who've lost everything to these strikes by America may be attracted more towards extremist ideologies. This cycle would eventually lead to an environment where the U.S.'s efforts towards counterterrorism will be wasted, as more and more Yemeni soldiers join militant groups looking to avenge themselves and their loved ones.
Cold. Nearly the entire population of over 2 million people has been displaced, and many are living in flimsy tents.
Countries and people from all over the world have shared their opinions on the U.S. strikes on Yemen. Some openly supported the strikes, saying that it is needed to eradicate militant groups in the areas, whereas some have openly rejected these strikes and have demanded they stop them. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries like UAE and Bahrain have openly supported the U.S. strikes on Yemen. They believe that is an essential step to counter terrorism as well as reduce Iran's influence on the region. Many Middle Eastern countries have diplomatically collaborated with the United States to counter Iran's influence and its funding of the Houthis. With the West on their side, they will have increased militarization and would be safe from militant attacks. Iran, being a key member in this conflict, has made its stance pretty clear. They believe that the U.S. strikes in Yemen are an example of aggression and imperialism. The government has also shown their full support to the Houthis who are fighting for Yemen's freedom. They are framing this conflict as a fight against Western powers controlling Yemen and its future. Iran is looking to use this military tension to their favor, hold their influence in the Middle East. Like Iran, China and Russia have openly criticized the U.S.'s involvement in the Yemeni civil war. They have highlighted that their strikes have damaged countless civilians and property. With this ongoing conflict, China and Russia would look to form their influence in the Middle East by offering their support. By openly opposing American interventions, they've made it clear that foreign military interventions aren't the optimal solution to resolve regional conflicts. The increasing toll of civilians and property damage caused by the U.S. drone strikes have alerted the United Nations, and they're making efforts to ensure peace in the area. These efforts usually go in vain, as powerful countries like the U.S., Russia, and China often reject the proposals that don't go in their favor. The U.S. military involvement in regional conflicts of a country isn't new to anyone. A familiar script is being followed in the Middle East, like the American involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq. Even though the U.S. aims to help counter terrorism, promote regional stability, and promote fair democratic elections, the reality is something else. Every intervention the U.S. has done in the past few decades has resulted in an even nastier result. Yemen's the next chapter in America's War on Terror campaign. The adverse aspect of this campaign is that it just focuses on eliminating extremist threats towards national security. To achieve this, it often overshadows the dire consequences of military actions like humanitarian crises and destabilization, which could weaken the country at its core. The number of civilian casualties in these recent strikes has been catastrophic, highlighting how anti-terrorism operations can be agonizing for the civilians. The U.S.'s approach in Yemen also shows how much it relies on proxy wars in general. By helping Saudi Arabia and other friends, the U.S. stays out of the war itself while still having an impact on how it ends. This allows them to play a key role in area politics without having to pay for all the costs of having people work on the ground. But proxy wars often make battles worse, make it harder to tell who is responsible. The ongoing strikes in Yemen will most likely worsen the situation in the country. The Houthis won't hold back their attacks and might even come back stronger thanks to the funding by Iran. The humanitarian situation in Yemen is expected to deteriorate as military operations continue, necessitating further international assistance and resources to address the severe aftermath of the protracted fighting. This has the potential to inflame tensions and widen religious rifts in the area. This is enough to cause certain troubles. Escalating U.S. involvement could destabilize the broader Middle East. Neighboring countries like Oman and Djibouti may face spillover effects, including refugee influxes and economic disruptions. These nations, already facing their own security and economic challenges, could see growing instability, which may lead to increased military tensions or even lead to proxy conflicts. As external powers like Iran and Saudi Arabia continue to engage, the risk of a broader regional war grows, further complicating the global effort to address the Yemeni crisis and regional security dynamics. The United States' unilateral moves may strain its relationships with allies that prefer diplomacy over armed involvement. Simultaneously, antagonists such as Russia and China may use these tensions to enhance their influence. They might view U.S. activities as another evidence of overreach, undermining the country's reputation in international organizations. This might lead to a rebalancing of alliances in the Middle East, with nations seeking closer links to non-Western powers, undermining the U.S.'s capability to build global consensus on conflict resolution. We know that the U.S. military involvement in Yemen is wrong on many levels. So, what are the alternative actions? For starters, the United States Army could collaborate with intelligence agencies in other Gulf countries to launch an on-ground initiative to track down Houthis and other militant organizations. This would save the innocent Yemeni citizens and won't leave them displaced from their homes. The United States government could collaborate with humanitarian organizations in Yemen to provide relief to the suffering citizens. This would help stabilize the country and save many young civilians from joining the extremist forces. What do you think? Is the United States doing the right thing by intervening in Yemen's regional? Was this military intervention necessary, or could they have done something else? Let us know in the comments section below. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Till then, have a nice day. We'll see you next time with another video.